I paid the $5,000 fine my neighbors gave me, and then I bought their entire street 2 weeks later. Let that sink in. At the time, I was standing in the middle of the Maple Ridge Estates clubhouse, holding a thin white envelope that felt heavier than it should have. The paper inside was crisp, official, cold, visualization of community aesthetic standards. That was the phrase Brenda Whitmore used. She stood at the front of the room in a cream blazer, chin slightly raised, like she was delivering a verdict instead of reading a fine. Around her, the rest of the HOA board nodded in quiet agreement, smug, satisfied. I looked down at the number again, 5,000 USD. For what? Because my house did not align with neighborhood expectations, because my front yard was under-maintained, because I refused to repaint my door the approved shade of gray. Everything in Maple Ridge Estates was gray. Gray doors, gray fences, gray smiles. And apparently, they wanted me to be gray too. I could feel the eyes on me. Neighbors I had waved to for months. People I helped carry groceries for. The same people who now avoided eye contact, or worse, watched me like I was a problem finally being handled. Then I saw my mother. Linda Carter sat 3 rows back, arms folded tightly across her chest. She did not look surprised. She did not look upset. She looked embarrassed. Next to her, my sister Ashley leaned over and whispered something. They both glanced at me. Then Ashley shook her head, like I had just proven a point she had been making for years. Why can you not just be normal? I did not hear her say it that night, but I could read it on her face. Brenda cleared her throat, drawing the room back to attention. Evelyn, you have 7 days to correct the violations, she said. If not, the board will proceed with further action, including legal measures. Further action, legal measures. The words hung in the air like a quiet threat. Someone in the back actually clapped, a short, sharp sound. It echoed more than it should have. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, not speaking, not arguing, just watching. Watching Brenda's lips press into that thin, satisfied smile. Watching my neighbors shift in their seats, relieved it was not them. Watching my own family look away. Then I nodded once. Understood. My voice surprised even me. Calm flaught. I turned and walked out of the clubhouse without another word. The night air was cooler than I expected. The streetlights cast long shadows across perfectly trimmed lawns. Identical houses lined both sides of the road, like copies of the same idea. Order, control, perfection. I got into my car and sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel. For a moment, I let myself feel it, the sting, the humiliation, the quiet, familiar weight of being the one who never quite fit. Then I exhaled, slow, steady, and something inside me shifted. Because what Brenda Whitmore did not know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 11 months, I had been quietly buying the land beneath their feet, not as Evelyn Carter, but through a company they had never heard of, North Bend Property Group, LLC. And by the time they finished voting me out of their neighborhood, I would already own it. The next morning, I paid the fine before breakfast, not because I agreed with it, not because I was scared. I paid it because people like Brenda Whitmore always mistake silence for surrender. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted the entire board comfortable. I wanted them smiling over their coffee, believing they had put me in my place. At 8:12 a.m., I received the confirmation email from Maple Ridge Estates HOA. At 8:14, I forwarded it to Daniel Brooks. His reply came 30 seconds later. Payment confirmed. We are clear to proceed. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and poured fresh coffee. My house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping softly against the back windows. The place they called an eyesore looked exactly the way I wanted it to look. Clean lines, dark blue front door, native grasses in the yard instead of overwatered decorative fluff, no stone lions, no fake European fountain, no desperate little signs screaming money. I had never hated Maple Ridge because it was expensive. I hated it because everything in it felt performative. Every porch was a stage. Every dinner party was a competition. Every smile came with a hidden blade. And for 3 years, I had let them think I was the strange one. By noon, Daniel and I were on a video call, reviewing the latest acquisition documents. He wore the same navy tie he always wore when he was about to say something expensive. "We closed on the Hawthorne property this morning," he said. "That makes 6. 6 on the street?" I asked. "6 total in Maple Ridge. 4 on your street. 2 around the south entrance. We are also in position to purchase the remaining debt package attached to the Whitmore development parcel, if you want to move now." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the immaculate row of houses across from mine. Brenda lived 3 doors down in a white colonial with black shutters and a wreath she kept up year-round as if seasonless charm was a personality. "Move," I said. Daniel nodded once. "Then by the end of the week, North Bend will control the parcel, the old clubhouse loan, and a majority of delinquent assessments tied to the board members." That last part made me smile. "Board members," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "It turns out people who lecture others about standards are not always current on their own payments." Of course they were not. That afternoon, my mother called for the first time in 4 days. I let it ring. Then Ashley texted, "Mom says you embarrassed everyone at the meeting." Why did you have to make it weird? I actually laughed. A short, dry sound. I had stood there, taken their public humiliation without a scene, and somehow I was the one who made it weird. I did not answer. An hour later, another text came through. Brenda was only doing her job. "You always take things too personally." That one sat on my screen for a full minute. Too personally, as if a public shaming, a $5,000 USD fine, and a threat of legal action against my home should have rolled off me like spring rain. As if people had not been telling me my whole life that pain only counted when it belonged to someone else. I blocked Ashley after that. I did not do it dramatically. No final message, no speech, just block. Then I drove to the clubhouse. Not for a confrontation, for a look. Maple Ridge Estates looked especially polished in late afternoon light. Stone entry sign, drummed hedges, flocks hanging from porches, children on bikes with expensive helmets and parents who looked like catalog models pretending not to notice me. The clubhouse sat near the center of the development, like a miniature courthouse. Neutral brick, white columns. A place built to make petty people feel powerful. I parked across the street and watched Brenda step out the front doors with 2 board members trailing behind her. She was laughing, one hand on her chest. Head tipped back, they looked relaxed. Victorious. Then she handed one of them a folder, and I caught a glimpse of my address printed on a label. So that was how they spent their afternoons. They were already building the case. I watched until she disappeared into her SUV, then called Daniel. "They are moving faster," I said. "I expected that," he replied. "Which is why I took the liberty of pulling the board's financials this morning. And if they try legal action, we can answer with foreclosure notices before they finish serving the paperwork." I went quiet, not because I was shocked, because I wanted to savor it. There is a very specific kind of calm that settles over you when the people trying to bury you do not realize they are standing in their own grave. That was the calm I felt driving home. 2 days later, Maple Ridge posted the agenda for its annual community meeting. Intimate 3. Enforcement action against 14 Maple Lane, my house, my removal. I read it twice. Then once more just to admire the arrogance. They were going to do it publicly. Of course they were. Public humiliation was the only language these people truly respected. By evening, the rumors had already spread. One neighbor stopped watering his lawn when I pulled into my driveway. Another woman pretended to check her mail while staring openly at my front porch. My mother drove by at 6:30, slowed just enough for me to see her, then kept going. No one knocked on my door. No one asked for my side. That was fine. They were all going to get a front row seat soon enough. At 9 that night, Daniel sent over the final numbers. North Bend Property Group now controlled enough debt, enough property, and enough proxy votes to swing the entire meeting, not just survive it, control it. I read the line twice. Then I walked through my house, turning off lights one room at a time. Kitchen, hallway, living room. The soft yellow glow faded into darkness until only the porch light remained, cutting a clean line across the front steps. Outside, Maple Ridge looked peaceful, perfect, untouchable. Inside, I stood in silence and smiled, because they had scheduled a vote to remove me from the neighborhood. What they did not know was that I already owned the majority of the vote. The annual Maple Ridge community meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. By 6:40, the clubhouse parking lot was already full. I took my time getting there. I wore black slacks, a fitted ivory blouse, and the same wool coat I had on the night. Brenda handed me that fine. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. I did not need dramatic anymore. I needed precise. When I stepped out of my car, conversations softened around me. Not fully, just enough for people to pretend they were not talking about me. That was one thing Maple Ridge always did well. Cordice with good posture. The clubhouse lights glowed warm against the darkening sky. Through the front windows, I could already see rows of chairs filled with neighbors, board members, and the kind of people who only showed up when they thought someone was about to be publicly punished. My mother was there. Ashley, too. They sat near the front this time, not hidden in the back, not embarrassed now. They looked ready, expectant, like they had come to watch an execution and wanted good seats. I walked past them without stopping. Ashley caught my sleeve as I moved by. Evelyn. I turned slowly. Her face was tense, but her voice carried that same old note, half accusation, half fake concern. "You do not have to make this worse," she said quietly. "Just agree to fix the house, apologize. Brenda said the board might show leniency." I looked at her hand, still resting against my coat. Then I looked at her face. "Tell Brenda not to worry," I said. I came prepared. Ashley let go like the fabric had burned her. Inside, the room smelled like stale coffee, lemon cleaner, and nervous ambition. Brenda stood near the podium in a pale blue suit, holding a stack of papers against her chest. She was smiling at people as they entered, but it was tight controlled. A woman trying very hard to look calm. When she saw me, her expression changed for half a second. Not fear, not yet, just irritation. I took a seat in the third row, aisle side, closest enough to be seen, far enough to make them come to me. At exactly 7, Brenda stepped to the podium and tapped the microphone. The room fell quiet. "Good evening, everyone," she said. "Thank you for coming to the Maple Ridge Estates Annual Community Governance Meeting." She ran through opening formalities first. Budget updates, landscaping proposals, pool maintenance. The kind of dry procedural nonsense people tolerate, because it gives small tyrants a stage. Then she reached item 3. I watched her fingertips press against the paper before she read it. Enforcement action regarding property compliance violation at 14 Maple Lane. A murmur moved through the room. Brenda lifted her chin and looked directly at me. As many of you know, the homeowner at 14 Maple Lane has failed to maintain the visual standards required by our governing bylaws. Despite prior notice, formal citation, and ample opportunity to correct these violations, the property remains in non-compliance. The board is therefore requesting authorization to proceed with legal action, including removal proceedings if necessary. There it was, removal proceedings. My mother stared straight ahead. Ashley did not look at me at all. One of the older men on the board, Harold Sykes, adjusted his glasses and added, "This is not personal. This is about protecting property values." Not personal. That was always the lie people told, right before they tried to take something from you, Brenda continued. Before the vote, the homeowner may make a brief statement. She gestured toward me with one manicured hand. The room shifted. People leaned back, turned their heads, waited. I stood. For one long second, no one spoke. Then I stepped into the aisle and walked to the front of the room. I did not hurry. I did not fidget. By the time I reached the podium, I could feel every eye on me. Brenda moved aside reluctantly, but she did not hand me the microphone, so I took it myself. That tiny motion landed harder than I expected. I heard one sharp inhale somewhere in the room. I set a slim black folder on the podium and opened it. "Thank you, Brenda," I said. Her smile tightened. "I appreciate the opportunity to respond before you attempt to remove me from property that, as of this morning, you no longer control." Silence, actual silence. It spread through the room so fast it felt physical. Brenda blinked once. "I am sorry?" I turned one page in the folder. "My name is Evelyn Carter. I am the homeowner at 14 Maple Lane. I am also the managing member of North Bend Property Group, LLC. That landed. You could feel it. Confusion first, then recognition, then the first ripples of panic. Harold frowned. "What does that have to do with this meeting?" I looked at him. Everything. The back doors of the clubhouse opened. Daniel Brooks walked in with 2 associates carrying document boxes. Calm, clean-shaven, perfect navy tie. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone delivering consequences that were already legally filed. Brenda's face lost color. Daniel reached the front, handed me a packet, then turned to the board. "Good evening," he said. "I am counsel for North Bend Property Group. I am here to formally notify the Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association that North Bend now controls a majority of delinquent debt attached to this development, including the clubhouse note, the Whitmore parcel obligation, and several board-linked assessment defaults. In addition, North Bend holds direct ownership or proxy control over a majority of voting interests eligible for action at this meeting." A chair scraped loudly across the floor. Someone whispered, "What?" Doc Brenda stepped forward. "That is not possible." Daniel gave her a look usually reserved for people who had mistaken confidence for legal standing. "It is not only possible, Miss Whitmore, it is documented." He began distributing packets. Pages flipped. Eyes widened. A few people stopped pretending to read and simply stared at the signature pages. I kept my gaze on Brenda. "The land parcel under the East Expansion Project," I said softly. "Mine. The defaulted assessment bundles tied to 3 current board members? Mine. The clubhouse refinancing instrument your association has been behind on for 8 months? I tilted my head slightly. Also mine. Harold stood halfway, then sat back down when his knees seemed to lose interest. "This is a trick," Brenda snapped. "No," I said. "This is paperwork, which, unfortunately for you, lasts longer than gossip." A few people actually laughed. Not many. Just enough. Brenda heard it too. Her eyes flashed toward the room, searching for support, but support looks different when money changes sides. People who had nodded along with her last week were now studying their packets like survival manuals. My mother finally looked at me then, really looked at me, not like a daughter, not like a problem. Like a stranger holding the deed to the ground under her chair. Ashley leaned toward her and whispered something urgent. Linda looked pale. Daniel adjusted the papers on the podium. "Since North Bend controls the voting majority, we are exercising that authority tonight." I took the top page from him. My hand was steady. "Effective immediately," I said into the microphone, "the current Maple Ridge HOA board is dissolved pending financial review and restructuring. Brenda Whitmore, Harold Sykes, and all listed officers are removed from governance authority as of this moment." The room erupted. Questions, protests. Half-finished sentences. Someone stood. Someone else sat right back down. Brenda grabbed the edge of the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. "You cannot do this," she hissed. I looked at her. Then I reached into the folder and removed one final sheet. "You fined me for my house," I said, "so I bought yours." That was the line that broke the room. Brenda's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I held up the notice. "Your home is tied to the Whitmore parcel guarantee. Since that debt is now under North Bend control and the note is in default, this is your formal demand to cure. You have 10 business days." A man near the back muttered, "Jesus." Brenda stared at the paper like it was written in fire. My mother rose suddenly from her chair. Evelyn, she said, voice shaking. Surely this is enough. The nerve of that nearly made me smile. Enough. That word always arrived, after I finally stopped absorbing the damage quietly. Ashley stood too. You are taking this too far. I turned toward them slowly. Was it too far when you sat here to watch them take my home? Neither of them answered, because there was no answer to that. Only hierarchy, and for the first time in their lives, they were standing on the wrong side of it. Daniel stepped beside me. For the record, the new ownership will also suspend all pending enforcement actions against 14 Maple Lane. Those actions are null. A small clap started somewhere in the room, then another. It was not applause for me exactly. It was relief. Courtly, opportunistic relief. The kind that comes when people realize they picked the wrong villain. I closed the folder. The room slowly quieted. I took one last look at Brenda, at the board, at the neighbors who had watched me like prey 2 weeks ago. Then I said, calm and clear, you wanted me out of this neighborhood. From now on, if you want to stay in it, you ask me. And that was the moment Maple Ridge finally understood. I was never the weakest person in the room. I was just the quietest. 3 houses on the left, 2 on the right. And more to come, not because I needed them, but because I understood something they did not. Power is not about having more. It is about knowing exactly when to stop pretending you have less. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A message from Daniel. We have already received 2 calls from board members requesting private discussions. Of course they had. The first instinct of people who lose power is not reflection. It is negotiation. I typed back 1 line. They can submit requests in writing. Then I put my phone away and walked to my car. As I drove through Maple Ridge Estates, I passed Brenda's house. The wreath was still on her door. Perfect. Untouched. For now, I slowed for just a second, then continued down the street without stopping, because this was never about revenge. It was about correction. And correction takes time. That night, I stood in my living room with the lights off, looking out through the front window at a neighborhood that finally saw me clearly, not as the quiet one, not as the odd one, not as the easy target, but as the person who never needed their approval in the first place. They tried to push me out of my own home. Now they wait to see if I will let them keep theirs. Let me ask you something. If someone tried to erase you from your own life, would you walk away quietly? Or would you take everything they built on top of you? The room did not recover after that. Not really. People stayed seated longer than they needed to. Conversations broke into fragments. No one quite knew how to leave without acknowledging what had just happened. Power had shifted, and everyone felt it. I stepped away from the podium and handed the remaining documents back to Daniel. He gave me a small nod, the kind that meant everything had landed exactly where it was supposed to. Behind me, Brenda still had not moved. She stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the table, the other holding the notice I had given her, like it might disappear if she loosened her fingers. Her perfect composure was gone. What remained was something smaller. Something real. Fear. I did not gloat. I did not need to. Some victories do not require noise. I walked down the aisle slowly, past the same neighbors who had watched me stand alone 2 weeks earlier. This time, they moved, not dramatically, just enough to make space. A subtle shift. But I noticed, people always reveal themselves in inches. When I reached my row, my mother was waiting. She looked older than she had a week ago. Not physically. Something else. Something in the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was finally aware of the weight she had chosen to carry. Evelyn, she said softly. I stopped, but I did not step closer. We did not know, she added. I held her gaze. That is the problem, I said. You never wanted to. Her lips parted, but no words followed. Ashley tried next. You made your point, she said. You do not have to keep going. I let a small silence settle between us. Then I shook my head once. I have not even started. That landed harder than anything I had said at the podium, because this was the part they were not prepared for, not the takeover, the follow-through. I stepped past them and walked out of the clubhouse without looking back. Outside, the air felt different. The same streetlights, the same identical houses, the same carefully trimmed hedges. But something had shifted beneath it all: ownership. Not just legal, psychological. For years, Maple Ridge had operated on an unspoken rule. Control belonged to whoever spoke the loudest, judged the hardest, and pretended the most convincingly. Now it belonged to whoever held the paper. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking down the street.